Welcome back to Apocalypse and Genesis. Today I thought we could share a bit of the eternal wisdom that connected our cultures. Back before the nations and kings and brand X religions, we could see a recurring pattern in the stars for the abiding lessons of life. We had a few different names for the great truth. We called it the Prisca Theologia, the perennial philosophy, the religion. And to sum it up, I would say it comes down to a choice. You can see the cyclic, holy oneness of nature, or you can see what's going on as a cosmic battle with yourself as a divine participant. What do you see in the yin and yang? Because how you see the world changes the very facts of your experience. Both views, pessimistic and optimistic, are encouraged by God and his deceiver. To this day, their followers divide the world into camps, those ready to leave this world behind and those ready to hack their way to a more perfect future. The path of the true Moshiach versus the path of the Crusader and Mahdi. The ironic thing, I suppose, is that people who choose one path can one day end up on the other. Pretty sure that's what happened to me. 3 decades of being duped and finally getting tired of it. Here are some views of the moment of creation I call Apocalypse and Genesis. On the left, you can see a clear Egyptian influence on the early Hebrews, an image of God in his moment as the Ankh of life, below which they engraved the name of their Leonine god El as an arrival of Bull of Heaven to what was the new first of Aries, where their avatar Moses turned Orion's staff into a serpent and made it his idol. Viewing the Ankh astronomically, Virgo ascendant had accepted the staff of Orion when the sky had fallen to the right. Write the word Ur in Egyptian, Phoenician, or Ugarit, and you get different aspects of the same cosmic reality. Egypt recalled a nova when the vernal equinox passed the head of Virgo 13,000 years ago. Phoenicia had seen the battle of a heron and serpent. Ugarit saw a bright comet descending upon a dimmer star of the staff god at the new first of Aries. Egypt said the great truth of the goddess of life was in how she tied her girdle with the knot of Tiet. Note how it hangs. The triangle of Aries at her womb looks like a heron falling upon a serpent, where a star of conception can be seen on her skirt. The controversy in the Bible verse is in the final phrase. Whom do you see as the sons of Sheth? All the descendants of God's third Anunnaki son? How about all mankind? Because man is the meaning behind the name Enosh, Seth's child. Or how about the whites? Because racism began 5,000 years ago with Noah, right? Whatever the case, our divisions are getting worse by design, especially during the usual election year gamesmanship. Since 2009, I have sought to warn you, ineptly, unconvincingly, with scarcely a shred of proof, and thus I labor under the curse of Cassandra, allowed to tell you the truth only as long as no one might believe it. It's why perhaps I'm still here. Some astronomers who tried to tell you what's coming are not. Some microbiologists who tried to tell you about the genocidal cull named COVID were killed. A few righteous priests. When truth becomes enemy to the powerful, like the implications of Epstein's edited list of child-abusing traitors, those giving warning must die, go to jail or concentration camp, be slandered. I'm extremely curious to see what celestial entity God views as his false prophet. Jupiter warned us twice at Aquarius, and this spring will shout at the border of Aries with Taurus. He isn't due to speak the name Yeshua until autumn equinox of 2026, so pray for 2 more years. Saturn warned us when he took up residence in Aquarius, where he is soon to be crowned the new Shamash. So I wonder which planet or moon will be closest to the Star of Jacob when Baal or Quetzalcoatl return in their glory. The word religion comes from religare, to bind, as in the young son tied by Abraham to a stone altar. What binds us, the fallen, is a spell cast upon us 6,500 years ago, limiting our longevity and intelligence, enslaving us to a foreign empire. Prophets came to teach you to break the curse and escape before the next one is cast, and I wish you luck. So here come the ones who tie the knot, the heron and the phoenix, the dung beetle and his egg, a comet playing Tree of Life while wearing the Sethian crown. One darkens the sun, one reignites it. One is the heart of heaven, and one his impressive foot. El and Ea, they went by many names, holy and unholy. In their presence came a plasma event, followed by superflare and nova. Last time it showed up in Taurus, the time before that in Leo, the time before that in Scorpio. This time it's coming to Aquarius. You can attempt to ready yourself or choose to ignore it, as will most everyone, largely because humanity has been kept ignorant of history's greatest fact. One of the incoming objects is going to partially shield us from the greatest solar blast in more than 6 millennia. I believe the first to come was held in derision as Abzu, Thoth, Tiamat, the axe, or destroyer. I could be wrong. The mythologies don't always agree, but it should be like the first prophet of Deuteronomy 18, the relationship of John the Baptist to Jesus, Aaron to Moses, Tiamat to Marduk, Ezra to Ashum. The first is an elusive body, seen only when there is a bright light in proximity, yet far enough away for that first one to serve as a mirror to the second. Apparently, the Ohuelans expected it coming like a great moon, shadowing the sun along the Aries-Virgo axis, and lighting up with a cross when his sun showed up opposite him. Makes me wonder about the celestial body Isaiah once referred to as Lucifer. Will it be the blue or the red kachina? Is the shadow to come the scarab pushing his red star over the horizon? Does that make the light bringer the blue star? The red one was called Dumuzi, or Tammuz, or Dionysus, or Nergal, owner of the seven gates of hell. He is the one hidden by the thigh of Jupiter Zeus until he rises in the time of a fall harvest. Confusingly, different people gave them different characters. The blue one could be called Brahman or Ganesh, the red one Shiva. For Christians, the sun was the scarab and the father, the little sun god. For Sumerians, it was the opposite, with Nibiru Marduk, the sun, and the blue one, the grandparent, being replaced by Kudu-Ta, leading to stories of our periodic population bottlenecks. I'm not sure if Geb, the Lord of Earth, Enki by another name, will fall upon his serpent, or if both the dragon and his beast must rise from the horizon. Some of the stones show them on perpendicular paths, which is why I colored the snakeskin headband. But if you look at how they wrote his name in Egyptian as an axe or pot of water with a foot, perhaps you can see how that chevron got turned into an Aramaic aleph and the foot into a Greek L. Other meanings for Geb were El for God, Ab for Father. Note the clever marks on his cheeks. His sky could turn right or left, and the letter for that was the Sabian N, or the Hebrew Lamed, signifying pole shift. Here I was looking for clues in the first word of the Bible, Bereshit. As we saw, Hebrew and Egyptian were written in different directions, apparently with a thought to hiding different secrets of the creation. My assumption is that prior to being logograph letters of an alphabet, or numbers for the Kabbalists, the symbols were ideograms to be contemplated by the wise. And the way I think Enki confounded the languages was in handing out different alphabets to different tribes. So our one hope of understanding truth one day would be setting down our weapons and studying side by side our ancient symbols together, like maybe now before it's too late to graduate. The little tile on the bottom is the imprint of a cylinder seal. The first of Aries pointed to the Pleiades 5,000 years ago. At that time, ancient history's best sky trackers, the Maya, began their fourth Ahau of the long count with a birth of the Saturn sun in Virgo. It was minus 3114 Julian, and the pictured Jupiter moon at the Pleiades would come a dozen years later. The Ohuelans on the right said the reversal or pole shift began when the sunset brought Saturn and then Jupiter to light, and that they were the rams standing at Capricorn and Aries. For me, the birth of Shamash came on the death of a dear friend, October 25th of 2011. She did her best to fight for the people of Earth against those working to unleash the powers of darkness. And here we are a dozen years later, waiting for the dance of Lucifer and the Christ, the dragon and the beast, Osiris and Seth, Brahma and Shiva, Izcatlipoca and Huitzilopochtli, Quetzalcoatl and Coyolxauhqui, that somehow is supposed to change the world for the better. My friend's last warning to me, they are coming, the time is near. I say supposed to change the world for the better because what comes next in the history of the world depends on how a completely new set of leaders could remake the economy and politics when the ash settles and the mud dries. The death of 1 billion people preceded, and religion tells us not to fear what must come to pass. I guess this year we'll see if Saturn does a better job of calling apocalypse than did his son Jupiter at the heart of Aquarius. The important question is when we will see the Vav event, the three stars of creation that have been here hiding since 2015, the ones the UN cloaked with years of poisonous chemtrails. I believe it is these visitor stars that have begun affecting the Earth's pole magnetically and will continue more drastically over the next 3.5 years. It's probably what once occasioned triple spirals being carved in stone around the world. In the Arabic numerals, I believe we will see one of the mysteries of the 666 when the visitors show up at the Vav, the nail, the Gimel arriving to thread Virgo's needle later in the year. Matthew 19:24, Mark 10:25, Luke 18:25. Three lights of heaven we haven't known, spinning about like Orion's belt rising in the summer. Before Shamash, the Saturn sun reborn its crown, Venus and Mars are supposed to get together. And on the same day, there is an allusion to the Messiah's birth over in Cancer. The two lovers are then due to run off to the underworld. Even Saturn can prove a false prophet when it comes to cataclysm. God might leave it up to his eager and oh so greedy leaders to cull the herd by 1 billion people. Notice how the Babylonians placed the harvest a year or two beyond the Saturn-Mercury event at Aquarius. In the meantime, we have entrusted all our power and nuclear codes to senile and demented ideologues and criminals. What could possibly go wrong? Remember the phrase, it's all over but the shouting? 2,000 years ago, when the Romans were repackaging the tale of the unconquerable sun god inherited from the Greeks and Jews and Egyptians and Sumerians, Virgil was announcing the final age had begun. The event he was no doubt recalling was the starting gun for the 12th age of the zodiac, was a great conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and the Sun at Pisces at the end of February in 64 BC, close enough to the birth of Rome's greatest emperor to call the named successor of Julius our new avatar of the age, the previous having been Alexander the Great or Moses, depending on whom you read. It was quite the propaganda coup. There was an empire to save in the upheaval following assassination, and Augustus was the man for the job. That the Jews wouldn't begin the age of Pisces for another passage of the Great Conjunction in Pisces was because they were reading the calendar of Daniel 9 from back when he was advisor to Darius. They knew two Moshiachs, a high priest and his king, would live between 9 BC and 33 AD. So Daniel had forecasted the Jupiter sun at Aquarius, February 2nd, 5 BC, and the great conjunction of Pisces, December 3rd of that year, as a key to God's messianic timeline. Well, now we've reached the end of the end, the Saturn-Mercury event terminating the 14th year of Baruch, pictured on the Babylonian tablet, and harvest begins soon thereafter. I believe we are nearing the time the world must fall, something about a coincidence of the myths. The Celts, for instance, were expecting a return of Arthur Pendragon, a name meaning the chief dragon, and look where Jupiter is sitting, precisely at the head of a dragon. And then you have the Christians excited about Yahweh riding Pegasus. Meanwhile, his son, Adonai, is busy playing Lamb of God, stationed over the house of Aries. So which visitor was considered Baal? The one who played Bull of Heaven, or the one showing up at the new vernal equinox? I vote vernal equinox for Baal and Bull of Heaven for the good guy taking the captives home. But you know what? The symbols and scriptures can be crazy confusing. What's your favorite myth? Over the years, we have seen that the eye of the heron is the eye of the serpent, and together their conjunction makes the eye of God. And we are rapidly running up on the big day. The stone suggests it was a first of Aries event. As I've said elsewhere, what follows within months will be the day for a solar flare from hell, in the sense that He in Paleo-Hebrew, Proto-Canaanite, and Phoenician is H, and El in Egyptian was a lion. And those two characters together signify an axis from Aquarius to Phoenix to Orologium to Leo. It's probably this idea of the God of life having a wonky leg that occasioned Jacob and other Israelite leaders to ceremonially dislocate their hip as a ritual for wearing the Yahweh crown. See Robert Graves. In other words, hell is a time of man, our trial by fire and flood. Many of us, perhaps a billion, will join Jesus as a sacrifice for the world's sins, which may be a reason for thousands of years of ritual sacrifice, apparently still going on in caves, an ongoing holocaust to recall humanity's worst race memory, the creation from total destruction. And by the way, how about that solar event? Start reading articles about the coming solar max that precedes the grand minimum, the great heat before the great cold, because ice age happens every fifth precession, and we're now ending the fifth precession. Many of the ancients got excited when Venus and the moon passed Saturn. They saw it as a time for the visitors to cross paths. This Venus moon was special to the Byzantines, and centuries later it was adopted by Mehmed II when he conquered Constantinople for his prophet. It has since become the recognizable symbol of Islam. The eclipse of April 8th appears to have been significant to the Maya. Long ago, a friend told me of a coming eclipse that would break a spell cast upon us 6,500 years ago. He claimed the ones who masterminded our species were in the game of slicing and dicing souls and taxing our energies, making sure we never enjoyed all the gifts Source intended for us. If you've ever seen the movie Lady Hawk, you know this idea of a day without a night and a night without a day, when something terribly wrong can finally be made right. This eclipse at the first of Aries appears to have been important to the people of Ai, worshippers of Haya, the god or goddess of life who lived on the West Bank. It was one of the first cities destroyed by Joshua. Hard to believe that West Bank is still a killing field 3,000 years later. There's something seriously wrong with the arrogance instilled and fueled by the twisted ideologies of priests. 3,000 years ago, Hebrews, Canaanites, and Egyptians all knew and shared the Ankh, the scarab, and the uraeus crown. And suddenly that wasn't good enough for a Yahwist zealot at the head of Scythian invaders from the desert. Some people think apocalypse can hold off until 2029 and the return of Apophis. But it's pretty clear the folks of Mexico could remember getting into trouble right about the time the devil comet swung by. Not that the comet was the problem, he was more of a symptom, really, a return of rocks from heaven and other disasters following the eclipse. Around the time the scarab crossed the skies and the tree of life illuminated the great cross, Jupiter was expected to cross the border separating Aries from Taurus. So do you see Jupiter as our Lamb of God or as the new Bull of Heaven, as in the Epic of Gilgamesh or the Bundahishn? The difference would be April or May for something dramatic going on near the Pleiades. Whoever designed the Niebuhr disk there on the right expected David Gemmel's Time of the Two Moons, meaning I think that Thoth by another name is dew, the first prophet of Deuteronomy, our Moshiach ben Yosef. The Hindu, Celts, Etruscans, Mexicans, and Persians definitely remembered the cataclysm at Orion. They tended to mark it with stone circles, fire temples, and pyramids. They often showed it with a juxtaposition of two gods, like a lioness attacking a bull, or Orion riding Pegasus, or an archer attacking a lion, a pedestrian symbol hiding a greater secret. Basically, they expected the sky to fall. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but so should we. For the Aztecs, the fourth Ahau brought a sacrifice of two sky gods, one a destroyer they called Lamat, the rabbit, consort of the goddess, and one bright and terrible scorcher, brighter than our sun when it dims. The two new stars appeared in a sky of fire, the first one dim as a moon, bearing the impression of a rabbit or donkey on its surface. Soon all the gods sacrificed themselves, abandoning the sky. In this way, they said human beings might survive, and so began a new creation. The cycle of history for Sumer was 7 shar per precession, perhaps out of deference to the earlier Ram cycle and adopting a shorter view. The Hebrews turned the holy division of 7 sar into 7 days of creation, with each day taking only 1,000 years, saying God would destroy this place after 6 such days, then declare a day off. Rounding off the quarterly procession cataclysms in this way, people might have centuries of undeserved optimism rather than straighten up and fly straight. In the Epistle of Barnabas, chapter 15, verse 4, we are told the rabbinic history. In 6,000 years from the last creation, the Lord will bring all things to an end. Then his Son comes to abolish the time of the lawless one, judge the ungodly, change the sun, moon, and stars, and rest on the seventh day. Then we should beware. We long ago flew past 6,000 years from the last creation event. And in 2020, we also blew past the fifth Ahau of the Maya. So something huge is imminent, and it's just a matter of when. It's the puzzle breaking my head for 15 years. Thing is, the signs are not only becoming clearer, but their ancient drumbeat has reached sort of a crescendo. For the Egyptians, the birth of Saturn as the new eon came with a ceremony at the temple to the goddess. For us, that birth warning of the end came on the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th year of our new millennium. The ceremony of the goddess may have been of great antiquity. The followers of Kori, Isis, or Persephone remembered the ram, the ahau, and the sar, symbolizing them with a cross, 5 stars of a pentacle, and 7 revolutions of the parade. Followers of the goddess at Çatalhöyük portrayed her upon a throne of lions, suggesting Anatolia also recalled the Virgo Leo creation of the Sphinx 13,000 years ago. One cosmic timer for the ancients was the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn every 20 years. And with 3 such conjunctions in 60 years, a period Sumer called the Shushimu, Saturn and Jupiter would slightly surpass where the zodiac had been the last time. And in this way, precession might be observed, the 2 great visible planets working through house after house. The sun's vernal equinox was the other key measure, going in the opposite direction. A seasonal dance of the archangels each quarter precession. I believe this coincidence of equinoxes and solstices with the grand cross of the universe, Aries axis perpendicular to the Milky Way, was the great warning intended by Giza plateaus, Sphinx, and pyramids. So this is a tragic and wonderful time to be alive. Humanity must now individually and collectively decide whether to take our next step up the evolutionary ladder of spirituality or return to barbarism when the lights go out. From what I've seen of society in 7 decades, I'm not greatly optimistic for my grandchildren. And what worries me about Generation Z is neither are they. Only Arab historian Ibn Khaldun could see cultural improvement coming from the cities now being invaded by desert dwellers intent on remaking the world. Before it continues, Democrat regimes in California and DC would do well to study what's happening in Germany and Turkey, since neither nation has a long history of playing nice with foreigners. Some of the ancients expected our time of trouble to begin with a Saturn moon. The stone below right is Saturn devouring his young, which was Heron, the heart of heaven, devouring his serpent. In 1967 in Texas, archaeologists found a human had swallowed whole a western diamondback rattlesnake and promptly died. I'm sure it was a shaman repeating this mystery of the ages. Some expected trouble, like the probably a flood coming at the sign of a Mars moon between Jupiter and Saturn. And here you can see the frog as the destroyer flood god who comes on the Ahau. Count the big holes on the frog's back. Note the triangle of Aries on one and the diamond of Virgo on the other. So the flood god must be the one on the polar orbit. Or how about that X symbolizing a change in ecliptic? Ahura Mazda is coming, and Mars, the son of Jupiter and grandson of Saturn, was a big sign, according to Apuleius and Paul. What did the Bible say? Vel boweth down and Nebo stoopeth. Isaiah 46. Specifically, they worried about a Mars moon located at the new first of Aries, signified by the pillar of Marduk there between Venus and Saturn. Note this is the day a father, in this case Nabonidus, was to dedicate his daughter to the service of God. And they called this particular N2 priestess Enigaldi Nana. The job of an Entu priestess, aside from her temple duties, was to wait for the god to come calling and keep his royal bloodline alive by birthing a new avatar. Since Mary was known by the rabbis and the Mandeans as Babylonian royalty, perhaps we needn't be greatly surprised by her scandalous virgin birth in the royal line. The Mandean Book of John suggests the Baptist worshipped of the man Adonai, the son of Yahweh, as had David in Psalms 110. In the Mandean book, Mary says, Adonai placed into my hands and my two arms a burden. At one point, we found Yahweh of the Bible accomplishing the actions of Enki and El, found in earlier myths. Further, we found quotes attributed to Yahweh, originally spoken by Marduk, the righteous servant and son of Enki. Might it be that during the coming succession we will receive as much a reincarnation of the grandfather as a new possessor of the Holy Spirit? Well, what do you think? Have we been subjected to Frank Herbert's Missionaria Protectiva, a tale to set us up a new imperial tyrant? Caracas candelabra is hugely famous. Reference to it was made in the Ramayana in the 7th century before Christ. What I believe it is referring to is a sign that precedes our coming roll of the sky, the gathering of the planets before they disappear for a time. If you look carefully, you will see the sun, moon, and planets lined up around the Aries-Virgo axis, just as carved there in the flaming trident on the Peruvian hill. Nebuchadnezzar left us with a boundary stone speaking of the very next day. The sun was known to throw a fit when the Aries dragon finally descended from heaven. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Anu warns Inanna there will be a steep price to pay for bringing Bull of Heaven into the solar system to fight Gilgamesh and Jupiter. He says if she doesn't have 7 years of food stored up for her people, then there will be a terrible famine. And this might be where the story of the patriarch Joseph saving Egypt came from, humanity's attempt to survive one of these periodic 7-year cataclysms. What I meant to illustrate in this slide is that behind all the myths and scriptures, truth is one. You have a reference to the Epic of Gilgamesh backed up by Egyptian iconography and Hebrew storytelling. Obviously, the Bull of Heaven suddenly rose in the north, just as Jesus in the book of Revelation said the Queen of Heaven would rise up from the south. If that Dendera Leo is treading on a serpent, perhaps we have an indication of how far south we might expect the second object. I thought it interesting that the chevron and circle symbol on Jesus' tomb shows up on an Aramaic seal of the Achaemenids, and their stone signifies a super rare event that also shows up this May. It's Neptune and the moon lining up on the axis of the first of Aries, which is like asking for a once in 25,000 years event to line up with a once in 165 years event. What do you see as the animal carved on the Talpiot tomb just below the chevron and circle? Personally, I think it's the Lamb of God, but I guess we'll see in a few months. The Bible says the dragon and the beast are going to throw down a third of the sky. It's the tale of Lucifer being cast to the ground all over again, and the raising of a serpent hoisted upon a cross. The other day, someone asked how the sky might look different during a reversal, and I said it would be like suddenly looking up from the other hemisphere, everything just sort of backwards. The uncertainty of the near future is that we have varying accounts of what's supposed to go down. Some stories suggest a 120-degree pole shift, notably in the Bible where it says a third of the stars must fall. Others suggest the dragon and the beast will trade places. Another hint from the Bible. Of a Taino stone with the heart of heaven for a face of the Aquarian sun and a dragon following right behind. The idea is that polar opposites must swing past us, affecting the planet. Another stone shows the eye of the phoenix at the mouth of Pisces, depicted as an owl, a conjunction that brings a flare. I'll tell you, I'm not interested in how it looks, but rather, whether we might survive the event. One object was known to bring flood, destruction, and famine. The other brought fire and famine. And since both were expected momentarily and both bring famine, this is like the last chance. Stock up your pantry and prepare for violence. Bad things happen when people go hungry. Look at the French Revolution. When the sun rises on the summer solstice, the world will be precisely wrong in a way long anticipated by the ancients. It will be the day of juxtapositions when the archangels have finally played musical chairs and the stars have moved 90 degrees. Orion, the old vernal equinox when the sky last fell, will be the new summer solstice. You remember the tale. Jupiter was disguising himself as bull of heaven when he was mounted by a goddess named Europa, for whom we're supposed to feel sorry. Children and bulls were sacrificed to the Minotaur in Moloch ceremonies of Crete, Canaan, and Carthage for 2,000 years until Abraham executed a calendar reform substituting goats and sheep. When Jerusalem was built, someone carved a hand of God on today's north wall, which at the time was in the east. So when the prophets say they're expecting a lion Messiah coming from the Mount of Olives, guess what? They're referring to this new age we've finally gotten ourselves into. Seth will again be ascended, Orion thrown down, whereas on the last fall, Orion Osiris was exalted. The Ohuelan piece shows we get into trouble when Pisces is in the place of Orion or vice versa. The little Egyptian piece shows what happened in the last fall. Orion surmounted Pisces. I have a much older piece from Mexico showing it was Orion's head in the communion cup reading at the end of Pisces. So when the sky falls, watch for a star to blaze in the east and again in the south. Look for the stars to bleed. High drama is coming. In James Cameron's special Lost Tomb of Jesus, there is an interview with archaeologist Shimon Gibson, who says that there's no doubt about it. Those symbols on the facade of the Talpiot tomb meant something. It's unlikely the person or family carving out the tomb carved these things out at random. Bible scholar James Tabor says the chevron and circle symbolize the house of the dead, and I agree. Let me add that the original meaning of the Alpha Omega was apocalyptic. Add a Lamb of God to it, and you have the Aries Virgo alignment when Jupiter departs Aries, and that gives you a date. Add a donkey image to the left, and you have a time when Seth, also called Sab, the great peacock deity of the Star Watchers, and Negat, the prophet Pharaoh, were seen rising to the top of the sky to slay Osiris. Seth worshippers conquered Solamite Jerusalem long before they slew Moses Osarseph, the priest of the old god. Whether the image implies early Christians may have been a Sethian Samaritan offshoot of Jewish orthodoxy, that's a question for Bible scholars. Personally, I believe the sky is about to fall and we shall see the Milky Way upended again with Lepus and Sethian Aquarius standing above Orion, who just dove back to the underworld. In America, at least for the Utes, Seth's battle with his brother was a tale of Tawats, the hair god, versus Tavi, the wayward sun god. Aquarius and Orion in battle, Huitzilopochtli slaying Coyolxauhqui, Quetzalcoatl over Tezcatlipoca, a return of the dance, eagle rising. There are some who believe that Seth, the third son of Adam, the child said to be in his own likeness after his own image, as opposed to Eve's first vegetarian son who sacrificed her meat-eating second, is the essential one in the plan of creation. His name meant appointed. The first syllable in the Bible is bar, meaning son. In Genesis 3:15, a Messiah is promised, one descended from Seth, as opposed to Cain. The serpent is told, you will bruise his, as in the Messiah's heel, and the Messiah is supposed to bruise the serpent's head. And I'm sorry, but all I see is the dance. We saw that the red star, called Nibiru Marduk, is the tree of life comet, and we see it's part of an eclipse, and we see it's involved in the pole shift, and we can see it's the bruise to the heel of God. Might that make it the serpent? If I'm correct in thinking there's a pattern behind the various religions, the visual part involves a recurring apocalypse far beyond the morality tales and national propaganda. If so, a consequent lesson is that it very much pays to be a student of religion, history, and the psychologies of propaganda and deception. If you want to read both sides of history, for example, go to your breakfast table and place a Bible on one side and a copy of Manetho on the other. And you will find the ones you're supposed to feel sorry for, heirs of the Anunnaki, frequently in league with the very worst oppressors. Daniel as advisor to Nebuchadnezzar and Darius, Joseph supporting Pharaoh, Josephus working for Rome. In the Bible, you have the Hebrews suffering as slaves for 4 centuries, Genesis 15:13 and Exodus 12:40. Meanwhile, in Manetho, you see these same shepherd kings in charge of Egypt for 284 years of the 15th dynasty, 518 years of the 16th dynasty, 151 years of the 17th dynasty, and it was not until the 18th dynasty that Thutmose, the son of Thoth, was able to ship them back to Phoenicia. In Manetho, we learn that Seth or Set or Sab was also called Typhon, the apocalypse object described in Nonos, the Dionysiaca. And it sounds as if that object had other names, such as Bacchus, Dionysus, Dumuzi, as well as the giant who tosses the stars. I believe we find the same object in Zoroaster called Ahriman, one who attacked the earth on a vernal equinox long ago. Ostensibly, it's the Aries dragon of the Ohuelans, one expected. Sometime this year, we were also supposed to remember Orion as dragon of the sea, whereas to the Sumerians he was Mulsipaziana, the true shepherd of Anu. Perhaps both visions are accurate. The heron becomes a fisher of men when the poles shift and the oceans rise. 2/3 of Americans are suddenly slated to be gone, along with 85% of our GDP. If you have a globe, pick it up and think about what happens when the Bay of Bombay suddenly races to the North Pole, realizing the girdle of the oceans is 3 miles high and rushes along at 1,000 miles an hour. There will be great waves indeed when the pole shift begins. Like Atlantis, we could sink in a day. If you're going to bother voting for what's next in the way of American governance, I would recommend you start reading The Great Taking by David Rogers Webb, One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb, and think about what it means for the evil few, banksters, politicians, and arms merchants, now sweep up all the earth's wealth in preparation for real tyranny. What did Herbert Walker Bush used to say? If the people were ever to find out what we've done, we would be chased down in the streets and lynched. He wasn't wrong. Your politicians are a class of corrupt sellouts led about by demons supplying other people's money and children to abuse. One of the more confusing verses of the New Testament is this one. Learned men write Bible commentaries without stumbling upon the mystery. won't tell you if they do. So writers act confused about Jesus having to change rides in the less than 2 miles from Bethphage to Jerusalem, which is not at all what the scriptures were saying. See Isaiah 62:11 and Zechariah 9:9. See also Genesis 49:11 through 12. He ties his donkey to the vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He washes his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine and his teeth white as milk. The Messiah was supposed to be the child of a lioness. It's a Dionysian story of apocalyptic harvest at the tree of life. And perhaps El wasn't lying when he said we would surely die the next time we reached out to grab its fruit. Here's part of the Seal of Ada. It's a prophecy that started the stopwatch of apocalypse in September 2009 with Saturn Isimud departing Leo. Now we have come to the year Enki Aquarius steps on the first of Aries vernal equinox. Ouch. It says an eagle will descend before Dumuzi and Inanna, Mars and Venus, initiate the grape harvest, which back then was probably late July, in the time of great mourning, the time of Tammuz. And there to the left, you can see Sagittarius the archer holding Orion's staff. Looks like a reversal is coming, if you ask me. In which case, Leo will rise where Aquarius had been, and the Earth gets turned on its head. If you want to see what could cause such a thing, look at Maverick Star Reloaded's map of the coming pole shift, or check out the animation done by Nancy Leader on the passage of Planet X. I believe it's Planet X passing by that acts as the sufficient cause for Earth's pull to quickly switch places. By now, you've probably noticed that the quotes being sprinkled throughout this video have to do with the unity of religion and world culture. And it's not to introduce you to any new snake oil, just to show you that a central theme emerges from behind many of the myths and scriptures as a single story of creation and destruction. When the creator shows up, you might see him bringing one great sword crashing down upon this place. Or you can remember it as all about our usual wash cycle of history. It's all in how you view history. You can recognize transcendent cycles coming now and now to an end, or you can fret about the escalation of World War III, which is also going on. Yes, climate refugees will be a thing, and no, it won't have anything to do with our having burned fossil fuels or God getting angry. Those fairy tales are from people who think they're in charge, pretending to control that which they cannot prevent. Once upon a time, half a precession ago, the reversal happened in Leo. It happened again a quarter precession ago in Taurus. Next, it's expected to start between Pegasus and the whale. How is it that the ancient Sasanians of Persia and the Pictish people of Scotland knew this stuff, and we've managed to forget it? Do you suppose we're kept ignorant on purpose? Clement could see his God as a sometimes eclipsed son of truth. Some people, notably the sons of Cain in China, Egypt, and Rome, saw truth's image in their emperor or pharaoh. Well, please forgive me if I don't. I've been alive for the reign of 13 presidents, and the only one I might characterize as a good man was the first one. The Son of Glory is said to return, and there are any number of verses in your scriptures around the world talking about it. Do your best to get over the idea that the vast majority of humanity is headed to a deep, dark place for their souls to be snuffed out or tortured. I remember my mom could be more than a bit judgy. She used to say if she saw certain people in heaven, when she got there, she was going to turn around and go the other way. But I take hope in Isaiah 9:2. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. My hope is that people here are ready to break the shackles in which they've long been held instead of submitting to another 6,500 years of slavery to the Anuna. If you pay attention to the news, you know every intent of the leadership here is to repeat the enslavement of Genesis 47. Through an economic sleight of hand legislated in the past 50 years, they plan to remove your car, your house, the contents of your bank account, and retirement fund, only to leave you a stipend if you'll accept their mark of the beast. What's the World Economic Forum say? You'll own nothing and be happy. Look at the Agenda 2030 footprint for America's future. We're locked up in cities requiring a WHO passport to go anywhere, and more than half the country is off limits. Humanity has come full circle. Again, the Trinity approaches the axis. Again, Orion returns to the underworld, and Nergal, the Leontocephalus, rises up to tear us apart from another quarter. The Hindu called him Narasimha, others the Lion of Judah. Try not to take it personal. It's not that you messed up or God condemned your country for 200 years of bad foreign and economic policy, though many around the world would say that's been a problem. It's just the way the world turns in preparation for the new ice age. A great cold follows the great heat of our next solar max, which is expected in the next year. When the Bible speaks of the left hand and the right hand of God, think zodiacally. Know that the Most High was seen holding the pillars of the universe in his hands. Unfortunately, there will be a great deal of turmoil before we transition into the new golden age. A rabbi friend in Colorado has a copy of Ari's Shattering of the Vessels, the Shevirat HaKelim. It's a concept well described by the Big Bang of physics and perhaps by the Kabbalist Isaac Luria in his Etz Chaim Tree of Life. I don't speak Hebrew, so allow me a paraphrase. Before creation, there was the Or Ein Sof, the endless one, filling all existence. And when it arose in God's will to create the worlds and emanate the emanated, he contracted himself to a point at the center of his light, and he restricted that light so there might remain a void, a hollow, empty space within. And after this tzimtzum, or contraction, he drew down from the Or Ein Sof a single ray of light from his plenitude into the void, cascading all existence into it. And so he emanated, created, formed, and made all the worlds. If you were a physicist, you might look at it as both ends of a bridge between a black hole and a white hole, or a beam erupting vertically from a galaxy you're observing horizontally. But the way the painter Ari depicted the moment is with letters of the Aleph Beit shooting out from the center of the universe. The idea being that each letter becomes an object or soul that must one day reascend to the one, and that our mission, should we choose to accept it, is tikkun olam, to begin reassembling our little pieces of God and the earth before the event known as the rising of the sparks. Observing God's law is our first step of the journey. Have you ever seen the movie Dune, or perhaps read the book? There's the idea that within each of us resides the genetic and spiritual imprint of all our ancestors. So Frank Herbert suggests there was a centuries-long process by which the priestesses could cobble back together the timeless one who sees all that was, that is, and that is to come. In the real world, that is basically how our royal families got so screwed up, inbreeding generation after generation. So every time they went to reassert their genetic superiority over the rest of us, they reasserted a recessive genetic defect in their progeny. Today, the Anuna have an additional 19 genetic diseases to worry about. Meanwhile, a remarkable mongrel sometimes emerges from the genetic lottery taking place outside the castle walls. I think it was Jordan Peterson who talks about the fruit flies experiment. He says you can breed out any hint of eyes so they and their progeny are born blind. And yet, if you let them go on reproducing amongst themselves willy nilly, and seriously, what else can you do when you can't see? Within 7 generations, the eyes come back. In other words, the genes of our forefathers are iterated so well, even amongst the junk DNA, that we retain, even when we systematically eliminated legacies of the ancestors. Perhaps that is why giants are making a comeback, as in the days of Noah. Here's a depiction of the passage of quarter precessions. 3 claws of Shema have raked the world west to east and north to south, resulting in a new creation for the cornfield of life. And note that the sign of Leo has become a sign of Orion, which has become a sign for the end of Pisces in turn. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. Here, Da Vinci was trying to tell us that Orion is not your God, and maybe not even the right hand of the Father. In fact, the Orions, otherwise known as the Anuna, are not the be-all and end-all for this planet. They think they are. There are stories indicating their role was not near as heroic as portrayed, especially when you compare where we ended up versus where we started. I'll tell you a story I once heard from an Irish priest, and do with it as you will. Apparently, Bible stories and Sumerian myth don't exactly tell the tale as it was. The tale came out of the Isles, where Jeremiah introduced a Jewish princess to an Irish Scythian noble, and the stories of Anglo-Israel were born. In the beginning was an empire ruling the darkness. The leader's name was Ladon. He was a shapeshifter of 100 identities, and in that empire, humans lived on 144 known worlds. Ruthless oppression, taxation, and the occasional genocide of a colonial world led to resistance, and the Orions sought their freedom from the Pleiadians. And a leader named Jacob and his son Michael gathered rebels from 7 root races to oppose the God of the East, to whom the children of darkness still pray. And Jacob brought the rebels here to hide and locked away most of the gates. 300 warriors stayed here to rule us. 300 more remained among the stars to battle the empire. We never learned if or how the war ended. Jacob had a vision in which God spoke to him about the wickedness of man and told him to hide his people or to lead his people to salvation and to seek a living world and worship her as we do him. And she would provide for us and we would respect her and rejoice in her sanctuary. So how'd we do? Does this society honor God? Does it honor the planet? Here you can see the pole shifts. Leo attacking Pegasus, Aquila attacking Aries. It just didn't pay to be the bloody dragon appearing at the first of Aries. He was sure to get torn up. Either way the planet swings, there will be hell to pay if you're anywhere near a coast or a low altitude. Following the darkness, you will see a beast at the horizon. Try to resist the temptation to call it the second coming of Christ or the arrival of Lucifer or anything other than a sign of God. At Fatima, Our Lady said, "When you see a night illumined by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign given you by God that he is about to punish the world for its crimes by means of war, famine, and persecutions of the Church and the Holy Father." Lately, we've been looking around the world and seeing that mankind has been here eons longer than the archaeologists ever dreamt. Pyramids in Bosnia and China, legendary cities underwater off the coasts of India, China, Egypt, Spain, Greece, Cuba, Italy, Bolivia, Russia, Israel, and Japan. Footprints hundreds of thousands of years old, out of place artifacts, tails and remains of red haired giant cannibals. We are truly an ancient species, and we're a hybrid manipulated for thousands of years, which is why we have genes from nowhere on the terrestrial family tree. We're an animal who can't see well at night, and unlike any other creature here, but maybe the hermit crab, we have to rely on clothing. That doesn't sound much like evolution and improvement, does it? How'd we get so weak? Let's get back to the subject of the Prisca Theologia. Fundamentally, it is the notion that God once bequeathed to us something I call the wisdom, which is like an inner superpower, your ability to discern truth when what the world feeds you is an avalanche of bullshit. And somehow we can sense what is good and true and what's wrong. The man who introduced the idea of God's ongoing revelation was Marsilio Ficino, a philosopher translating Greek classics for the Medici during the Renaissance. He grew up Catholic with wide readings in philosophy and decided, like my favorite church fathers, that truth is one. The idea of truth with a capital T can pull you in two directions. You can start tossing out everything superfluous to get back to basics, like Thomas Jefferson taking scissors to his Bible, or you can entertain a multitude of notions in your head lightly, like books on a shelf to be consulted as life presents itself. So, do you believe the one huge idea to which all relates, or many little truths? The idea of truth revealed over the centuries was underscored as Ficino translated or commented on Homer, Hesiod, Plato, Plotinus, Porphyry, Iamblichus, and the Corpus Hermeticum. Here were grand, if not systematic, thoughts going back thousands of years. But at some point, the idea of one big truth must have broken his head because he burned his first work, a commentary on Lucretius. The Renaissance was a heady time. A flood of scholars and ancient Greek texts were flowing out of Constantinople in advance of the Muslims burning the Byzantine Empire and Christian learning to the ground. And what that did for Europe was cause a fundamental reevaluation of ideas they thought carved in stone for 1,000 years. Being exposed to ancient knowledge was disconcerting. Suddenly, people like Savonarola were wanting religious reform and a return to republicanism. Scholars like Giordano Bruno were saying Earth was not the center of the universe. And in fact, there might be a multitude of worlds. One of Ficino's friends was Pico della Mirandola, who attempted to systematize the knowledge of the day and offered to debate all comers using 900 ideas he'd picked up in his readings. You can just imagine problems for the church, centuries of keeping the people ignorant with a single institution as the center for all intelligence and power was about to be challenged at every turn. While they were piling up casualties of the Inquisition, translations of Aristotle would remake the church and paradoxically light the alchemical fires of science. The world would never be the same. A church that thought itself the arbiter of eternal truth was going to adapt or rot, and the jury is still out as to how it went. Another school of thought, taking us back to the beginning, was the concept of Bishop Agostino Steuco, the Vatican librarian. He spoke of there being one principle of all things, of which there has always been one and the same knowledge among all peoples. An idea embarrassing to contemplate after Christianity had recently begun a genocide across the Americas. But you can see the truth of what he was saying if you take a survey of the world's mystics through the ages. or take time within yourself. Study long enough, deep enough, and you will discover glimpses of God's vision shining out of the darkness. If I attempted to describe it, you would accuse me of being on drugs. But it's like the dream of Scipio. You can see this world from the stars and you can see the universe as God does. Themistocles Platon said, if you speak often enough with God, you will see the word itself, that is, God. And Zoroaster said, wisdom comes from the Holy Spirit, our friend, brother, and father. Close your eyes and go deep if you would sense the all. Which brings us to the idea that there is a periodic holy shit moment that humanity experiences, shaping the way generations feel about Genesis and Apocalypse, gods and devils, floods and conflagration, plagues and meteor storms, and how we come to regard the star signs. It was called the religion. And I favor this idea because I see a continuity in the myths and overlap in the religions and very similar themes carved in stone around the world. Just as an example, why is there an Ahura Mazda imprinted in Persian stone that looks precisely like what we find in stones from Egypt and Mexico? I would wager that the same object was observed around the world and that the selfsame star was the cause of our religions. For me, this idea is key. It doesn't matter what ideological high horse you rode in on. Your religious or philosophical belief does not make you superior to the rest of humanity. Conversely, if your beliefs have so vaunted your individual and collective egos that you wish to lord it over others, then I would argue you have forfeited your right to be heard. That little paradox of reflected arrogance is what is destroying the Middle East. Two groups of absolutists who long ago discounted the idea they could possibly be wrong or could ever get along with the others. Harmageda was the first recorded battle in history during the 15th century BC, and it is expected to be history's last battle any day now. We can see the same problem with the 2024 election, come to think of it. Such religion as needs to exist always did, and it had more to do with natural morality and the cycles of the earth than with any vengeful tribal god. Of special concern today are religions that continue to accept violence as their preferred means of proselytizing and cults engaged in the abuse of children, which appear far more common than any thought possible. Christianity gets into hot water from time to time with people who think there was never any logical or biblical basis for preferring a Trinity. 1 John 5, verse 7 outlines the idea that, as we've repeatedly discussed, there are three visual objects playing through our solar system since 2015. The big guy on the left impersonating God is at Karahan Tepe, Turkey. Remember, the ancients had the great atom as Aquarius Phoenix Orologium, the image in which humanity was made. And therefore ahead you have the heron falling, and therefore a phallus you have a phoenix rising. You can see similar designs on an African mask, a Mongolian monolith, another statue from Karahan Tepe, and a stone from Missouri Mound. The point is that the one, two, or three deities come together at one time as part of an eternal dance out of love or to do battle. Göbekli Tepe was made at about the half precession mark. Vernal equinox was at Leo, and if Leo was then above the boar in their depiction of the Big Dipper there on the left, then the world was upside down from where it is today. And on the middle stone, they were suggesting that when Polaris returns as North Star, as it has today, we would again get into trouble. So remember hell, Aquarius, Phoenix, Orologium, the great atom extending downward this year. I believe those hunter-gatherers were telling us to get ready for the next pole shift. Here you have the cardinal sightedness of our situation. If you place the new first of Aries in the north, you have Orion in the west and Leo in the east. And if you wait until summer and have Pisces in the south, then you will have Nibiru Marduk rising on high. He will be briefly preceded by the Heron, who quickly turns into the Phoenix, the Destroyer and the Scorcher, if you're into the Colburn. On the left, you have a Scythian Rhyton showing the Pegasus reversal of the stars of creation, and it's about the time the sky gets turned around. On the right, you have the tale of Seth and Horus, in which the priestly one is glorified by the king, but it's just another way of telling the story of the two visitor stars. These two pieces indicate one day we will see the three stars of creation together surrounding the sun, and the solar flare arriving at the time will dim our home star. And unfortunately for us, that would mean the destruction of modern commerce. We don't know how to conduct farming, transport produce, get it into distribution or onto the breakfast table without at least 100 mediators equipped with computers. There's an ancient Jewish document, possibly related to our time, called the Testament of Amram, the biological father of Moses. He said, I saw watchers in my vision, a dream vision. Two were fighting over me. I asked them, who are you that you are thus empowered over me? And they answered, we rule over mankind. They asked, which of us do you choose to rule you? I raised my eyes and looked. One of them was terrifying in his appearance, like a great serpent, and he wore a cloak of many colors, yet very dark. And I looked again, and in his appearance, his visage was like a viper. And I replied, this other watcher, who is he? He answered, this watcher, his names are Belial, Prince of Darkness, King of Evil. I said, my Lord, what dominion? He said, his every way is dark, his every work dark. You saw, he is empowered over the darkness, while I am empowered over the light. From the highest regions to the lowest, I rule over the light and over all of God. I rule over every man of his grace and peace. Over the children of light have I been empowered. I asked him, what are your names? He said to me, my names are Michael, Prince of Light, King of Righteousness. Now, if memory serves, Michael was the watcher of the east at Aldebaran. So what you have here is yet another reference to Orion in the summer solstice. 15 years ago, we were warned the gates are about to open. Where the Anuna descended last time is Mount Hermon, 15 miles north of the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force on the Golan Heights. I believe the greatest of the terrestrial gates was considered Stonehenge. So it will be interesting to see how our current governments might respond to strangers walking in the front door. The Messiah stone suggests they're coming around the time of the autumn equinox. One of the great signs we have reached a changing of the ages is the staff god. Jupiter was the flail and the shepherd's crook was Saturn. And when the prophets mentioned the word of God coming to them twice, I'm sure it was the arrival of Jupiter to the Aquarian sun, the Yod He. So our next big sign will be the Vav He, when the star of Jacob returns to the first of Aries. Personally, I think that will be in early April, but there is no biblical reason I can see for that to necessarily be true. It's not the least obvious what Jonas thought would be the 40-day warning for Nineveh. But given the severity of that city's repentance, it seems even the pagans knew the fatal sign. If it had to do with the sign of Jonas mentioned by Jesus, then I would start counting in early April, about the time of our coming eclipse. This morning I was saying it's all coming so fast now. I feel like a deer paralyzed in the headlights, and it's with a great deal of ambivalence that I say anything at all at this time. It's a fine line between playing the great fool and a wise man, and I don't like to think of myself as either. I'm just an old guy, super concerned about where we're headed. I'm excited that maybe we weren't all just deluded for 2,000 years expecting history to suddenly go bad, and that the visitor stars and the pole shift aren't just figments of my imagination. And yet I'm absolutely depressed by the ton of books and thousands of rocks on which I squandered my later years when I might have done so much more for those I love. Looking ahead to the coming elections, I would ask you to hang back from the confrontational arrogance and focus on maintaining some reserve for those you care about. And rather than getting excited by the promises of narcissist megalomaniacs playing with other people's money, count on the con as America tries to balance freedom and authoritarianism. One day we will look back on this time as having represented both the end and the beginning of history, in which we learned in a time of great challenge to hope again. Shema bless you and keep you now and forever. Take care.